Hello everybody. I'm going to make a tutorial on how to create some fun physics inside of Unreal Engine 4. I've already got a model set up here, my bowling pin. I'm not going to go through the process of how I modeled this. This is more about getting your models over into Unreal and looking at some of the issues that we might discover when we do the import of this geometry into that software. So let me get started in UE4. I've already got a few projects that I've been playing around with, but I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to go from games, and I want to work with a third person template, and I'm just going to give this a good name. So Kevin, that's me, and I'm going to call this my physics project. That's good. Kevin element underscore physics. Now I've got this offloaded onto my external hard drive, so I could bring it back to class if need be. I can move it around. That's really great. I am going to use the starter content and leave everything else as default. Let Unreal do its thing. And while it is, I'm just going to hop back into Maya and talk about some common problems, issues I think people come across when they're exporting their geometry from this world and for Game Engine. You do want to keep your geometry fairly lightweight. This is a lot of geometry right now for a bowling pin, but that's okay. I'm going to live with that because there's not going to be a lot in this scene for my simulation. But one thing I do want to double check, looking at this on the side view, I do want to triple check that this thing is sitting on what I refer to as the floor, or at least on the 0 y-axis. Let me just double check here that that's indeed the axis that I'm talking about. So I'm looking at my translates here, and if I move this up and down, I am indeed moving that on this order here. So I want this to be at 0. And the best way to do that, press the D key so that you can move your pivot point, and I'm just going to hold down the V key at the same time. V will allow it to snap to the bottom of the geometry. That's perfect. Then I go back to my move tool, tapping the W key, and I can position this exactly at 0, 0, 0. So I know that that's indeed sitting on the floor. So just in case, if it's up like that, type in 0 and get that right sitting on that dark gray line so that you know that it's indeed sitting on the floor. Now, I've created some problems with scale, and that's fine. This is going to come into my Unreal Engine really small, and that's fine because I want to show you a really cool workflow. Honestly, one that I'd given up on, but have recently discovered it to be quite useful. And that's this right here, File, Send to Unreal. I gave up on it, but I've been using it recently and I really enjoy it actually. So under this option here, once you made your model and you're really happy with it, you got your textures on, and I do want to just reinforce the work that I put into calling this object SM underscore. So that's a convention for Unreal static mesh, SM underscore bowling pin, good name. And all of my materials that I've been using have M underscore, and I just simply added a Lambert. I didn't bother using, it doesn't matter which type you use, but I didn't bother using the Arnold standard surface. It doesn't really matter because once we get it back over into Unreal, we're gonna have to mess around with the materials anyway. So a simple Lambert will do, that's totally fine. But the naming convention is important, M underscore bowling pin. Cool, and you'll notice that the name is exactly the name of my file. And just to be, that guy, I'm gonna utilize the old camel casing, so lowercase and then uppercase. Yeah, let's not get into too much detail here. But yeah, that's good news. So I'm going to use this Send to Unreal tool, which is really great. but I have to set an Unreal project. So I'd have one already in existence, which is back here. I'm just going to save all just to make sure that it is definitely generated on my machine. It will as soon as you open up that, this project. And just to have my eyes on the file itself, the folders, I'm going to go over to Finder and over on my external, Unreal projects, down below here, I should have this new, there it is, Unreal Physics. There we go. I've got a few in here that I've been playing around with. So Kevin Element _ physics, that's a great name. And I just want to watch this folder to see what's going to happen here in a second. So in Maya, I have to choose, first and foremost, File, Send to Unreal, set an Unreal project. It has to exist first and foremost. I'm going to go over to my volumes, my external, my Unreal projects, physics, and then there's the folder and there's the project. So all I need to do is back here, whoopsie, I didn't mean to do that, I made a new folder. Back here, all I need to do is highlight the folder where my project lives and then hit select. It'll look inside, and if there is a U project file like this, U project, then it will happily generate a new folder in here in a second, which is called import. So then you highlight your geometry, just simply select it, and then File, Send to Unreal, Selection, like so. It will look to that folder and create a new subdirectory called import. Now over here, we've got a whole lot of options. We don't really have to worry about it, but you can turn on smoothing groups and smooth mesh if you so wish. And I'm just gonna call this my SM _ and give it a good name, bowling pin. And it's an FBX export by default. That is perfect. Export said selection. Now where did it go? It's over here in a folder called import. Nice. So it just built a new folder inside of my project. That's awesome. I might want to also file save scene as, and since I just want to stay in the same house, I'm going to head into that directory and just create a folder called modeling, might as well. And that's where I'm going to keep all of my Maya files. Unreal project, Kevin Element physics, and this new folder here, I'm just going to rename it. It's actually useful that I accidentally made that earlier. I'm going to call this my modeling. Ooh, modeling, there we go. That's where I'm going to put all my models. Let's see if it changed the name there. Cool. So in here, I'm going to save my Maya file as just bowlingpin.mb. I'm not going to worry about the naming convention of static mesh SM right now. So I've got that saved and everything is living in this house. Super cool. If I wanted to, unplug my external drive and head off somewhere else to do some work, at least I've got it all in the same house here. Nice. So I've exported this, and just to reinforce, send to Unreal, selection, give it a good name, export selection, and I'm going to do this repeatedly, this replacing of the file. Because when I get back over to UE, I now have to import it in. So by default, you get this like blueprints maps. I'm going to create another folder here, and I'm just going to call this my meshes. It's not super important that you call it that. Little power tip, there's a button up here. Just gonna expand that so I can see the full tree of all of my directories. And there's another option down here for view. If these are starting to get too big, you can scale down your thumbnails. I like to make them really small so I get more real estate to do some work. So I'm going to go into this folder here and right click and import. It's that second choice from the top. And in my import directory here, I've got SM bowling pin. Nice. Now a bunch of object options will pop up here. This one's important for us, to generate missing collision. So if you haven't defined your own collision, then Unreal will do its best to try to solve for what is the collision. And we'll see that here in a second. So import all, and you'll notice it nicely brought in both of my materials, which I can mess around with later if I wanted to add bitmaps to the color, and that's awesome. Let me just throw a bowling pin out into the world, and I'll press F, and you'll see that it's very, very small compared to my good friend here, the mannequin. Like, oh, there's a tiny little, oh. Now I could finagle around with all of the settings for import to translate it and blah, blah, blah. But what's easier is just to go to Maya, and I'm just gonna scale this up. And I'm not gonna be perfect about this. I don't have to. But what I do wanna do from time to time, reinforce, bake my transform so that the scale is now set to 111. And I'm gonna delete my history by type, always a good idea. And then I'm gonna file, send to Unreal, selection, just overwrite the file, awesome. And then back to Unreal 4, right click on the asset. And then one of the options up here is to import the asset re-import, which is so great. And then it just, yeah, it fixes it. Scale it up a little bit more. I'm gonna save my scene, send to Unreal. I'm gonna shoot up my selection here. SM bowling pin. And just back and forth, right click, re-import, until you're happy. I'm happy with that. That will work for now. Now, if I double click down here on my object, I get another interface that pops up that shows me the geometry isolated all by itself. And there's a bunch of options up across the top. And one of which is collision. Now remember, we said that little checkbox, we asked Unreal to generate the collision for us. So if we turn on simple collision, we'll see here that it's made this pill around the geometry. That's good, but I'd love for the bowling pin to fall and actually, maybe the mass will cause it to land on the tip here. So how do we deal with that? Now, it might be wise at this moment, I'm just gonna close this interface, just to sort of see what this object is doing and how it's reacting. So I positioned it right in front of my mannequin, my third person actor here, just to make it easier for myself. And I'm just gonna scale this up. I'm gonna position it up like so, and I'm just gonna rotate it a little bit and tell it to be under physics. And how do I do that? I want this entity that I've just selected here. It's got a nice name, static mesh actor, hence the fact I use SM, static mesh actor. I'm gonna put it under physics, under our details here, scroll down and just simulate physics. Now I did some research. The mass of a bowling pin is 1.5 kilograms. So I'm just gonna type that in, that's awesome. And then I'm gonna press play and see what happens with my bowling pin. Now I can kick it around, it's fun. But you'll notice that the top of the bowling pin is not hitting the ground. It's not rotating around that plump center at the bottom of the bowling pin because of the collision. So if I look back here and double click on my object down in my content browser and turn on my simple collision, well, it's made this pill. Now I could try to use complex collision, but I've learned something. Physics simulations will not allow for you to utilize complex collisions. It wants to use the simple collisions. So how do we deal with this? We can, in Maya, we can create some objects that will define what is going to be our collision, which is awesome. I'm going to go to my side view, and now these objects that you create have to be simple. They have to be very, very simple. They can't be convex. In other words, let me just try something out here. I'm going to throw out a polygon disk, and maybe I'll see this in perspective view. I'll do this as fast as I can. I'm gonna scale it. So what I'm trying to do is make a wrapper that goes around this, and that wrapper would become, the skin around it would become the collision. And I'm just trying to make sure that I've selected my edges, but watch what happens when I'm gonna extrude this up like so, and I'm going to scale it out. And these have to be, like I said earlier, really simple, like just really simple. And they can, you know, penetrate inside of the object. It doesn't matter. But let's see what happens here in a second. I'm going to extrude that and scale it in. So I would love to be able to make these complex, these more convex type collision objects, but you're not allowed to. And I'm going to pronounce this flare here. And keep that in mind when I move forward. I'm going to try to get this done as fast as I can. Go up like so. Extend one more time. And then I'll just shrink this down like so. Yeah, that should do. So that would be really nice if I could say that this object here is going to be the collision. Now, when we define collision objects, we have to be very, very careful with the naming of that collision object. So UCX, all in capitals, very important, underscore, and then the exact name of the object that relates to the collision object. So SM underscore bowling pin. Exactly the same as the object that we're trying to apply this to. So then shift click, select them both, and keep in mind, I've got this nice little indentation here. That should translate over to Unreal, right? But File. Now with the two selected, I'm going to send to Unreal the selection, replace the bowling pin, export. You'll notice that when I re-import this, and from this view, we can actually re-import the base mesh. So if you happen to be in that view here, double-clicked on the object, and you're looking at it in the actual geometry editor, then you can just simply click re-import base mesh. Now the bowling pin looks exactly the same, so where's my collision object? Simple collision. That looks something like what I had just modeled over in Maya. But wait a second, it made a straight line and ignored this indentation, because this is what's referred to as a convex hull. Convex meaning that it goes in at that point. So, that's annoying. It just made these straight lines. Oh well. Well, let's try again. I'm going to throw this away. I'm actually going to save myself some time here, and I'm going to cut that name onto my clipboard and then throw this away. And from my side view, I'm going to start creating much simpler shapes. Much simpler shapes. So I'm going to add a sphere. Spheres are good. We can use spheres, we can use cones, we can use triangles, sorry, not triangles, cubes, but they have to have, they can't have any convex geometry to them. Now, I don't want a lot of geometry on my sphere here, so I'm simply going to, this could be a cube, you know, if you just wanted to block out a square space, that's fine. So this object here, I'm just going to decrease the amount of geometry So 10 and 10. Make it simpler. And then I'm going to move it up here, scale it out. Like I said, it can penetrate the object. It doesn't really matter. And I don't want it to go below the object ever, because don't forget this physics object has to sit on the floor. So this should be okay. Let me just scale it down a little bit more. So it goes inside a little bit, and then scale it up. Cool. And then I'm just going to take this object and clone it, shift and clone it with the move tool, and then I'm just going to scale this down. Now, the problem is, at this point, we've got two collision objects. How is our good friend over in Unreal going to know that these two relate to this? Now you got to remember that naming convention, that UCX is really important. This is going to be _01, the first collision object. And this one here is going to be the _02 collision object. Select all three. They're all highlighted. That's perfect. File, send to Unreal, selection, overwrite the file. Cool, this should work beautifully. When I re-import the base mesh, look what I got. Really tight and nice collision now that follows the shape. Now I said earlier you can't have convex. A single collision object cannot have any convex geometry, but I have two separate objects that are uniquely defining different areas of collision, which is awesome. So now, in theory, save it up. When I drop this down, it should look much more realistic. Yeah, it's sitting off the floor just a little bit, because don't forget that that one on the base of the bowling pin, the one on the base of the bowling pin was protruding a little bit out from the sides. That's fine. I mean, it's art at this point. So we don't have to be absolutely perfect. So now, for my project, I'm just going to start deleting some stuff. And just a tip about Unreal. You'll notice when I deleted all this geometry that I don't need, I've got this weird black patch. That's the shadows that were baked on when the lighting was built. So from time to time, you have to go up to build and build the lighting only. And it'll take some time. You'll see it down here in the bottom right, build lighting. It's not very long right now. I don't have tons of stuff in my scene, but it rebuilt the shadows and that looks really great. Okay, so may as well clean up my scene a little bit. I don't need this text and I don't need this tip. I'm gonna keep the lights up there, that's fine. Now there are these weird invisible boxes kind of hanging out on the outside here. For this project, I don't really need them. They're really intended to make the world look prettier through the camera. And it looks pretty awesome right now. So, I mean, the brightness of the scene just went up considerably when I deleted one of those boxes. You can leave them in. It's not a game changer. I'm gonna press play just to look around the world. That's good. All right, so get that bowling pin in, like so. Now before, I'm gonna clone this object out to make the actual setup of a 10-pin bowling game. I'm just gonna, I'm gonna make sure that the very first one that I create has all the properties and parameters that I need to make this work nicely. So I'm going to turn on simulate physics, and I know that I've got a 1.5, did some research, 1.5 kilogram pin. That's awesome. And now I'm just going to head on over to my top view, Now, little power tip. If I'm looking at this down here in my perspective view, I can right click. You can right click and drag in your ISO view, your top left and side, and then tap the F key and that will zoom on into the object that you have selected. F key will focus it in. So now I'm going to go to my move tool. I think it's Option. We'll duplicate the object. And I'm just going to set this up to be like a bowling scenario here. Now, if I wanted to, I could take the time to, really think about what the distance is perfectly between all of my bowling pins. You'll notice right now it's kind of jumping from grid point to grid point. That's because I have snapping turned on up here, which is nice. But I think for this, I'm going to turn snapping off and be a little bit more precise with where these things go. Once again, Option, drag. Yeah, Shift click, grab two objects, Option drag. I'm going to make this into a 10-pin scenario. I don't bowl, so I don't really know what I'm doing here. I'm just guessing. I've bowled in the past. Whoa. Be careful, I've got Maya head right now, so that should be the number of bowling pins that I need for this to work. Just nice, very nice. Cool. Go back to my perspective view. Looking good. And then I'm going to introduce the sphere. Now I could simply grab from my basic actors collection up here. I could just grab myself a sphere and throw it into the scene and put it up higher than the ground so it can drop down. And just say simulate physics, mass in kilograms. They're roughly 10 kilograms, these bowling balls. And I'm gonna give it a good name. I'm gonna call you a static mesh, SM_bowling pin. Nope, bowling, you're not a pin. Bowling, let's call it what it is. Bowling ball. Okay, there we go. Oh, I can do it. I can spell, I can do it, I can spell. Trying to go too fast. Where did it go? Where'd you go, bowling pin? Bowling ball? Oh, did I delete you by accident? There you are. Bowling ball. Bowling ball. Camel cased, everything's nice. Mass, simulate physics. Check that box. Press the play button. And in theory, I should be able to kick the ball and have it do its job. Ooh, strike. Nice. Cool. Now, I'm not really too sure what's the story of the third person mannequin, but he's got a serious kick. Like, he can just boot stuff around, and physics is all weird with him. It's kind of nutty. Anyway, it's fun that he's interacting with it. But we've got something working, which is really great. Now, the problem is, I don't necessarily want to start this simulation with having to kick the ball. Instead, I'd rather give the ball some impulse, a vector. I'd like to shoot it along that red arrow. We can triple check what red is down here. Click and drag. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that's X. Cool. So that's going to be important here in a second because I want to give my bowling ball some impulse. I want it to start at the very beginning of this, shooting forward when I press the play button to hit the bowling pins. Now I might, at this point in time, just think a little bit about the pins. I do think they're rotated a little bit wrong. So I'm going to go up high above in the sky. Focus on them. Remember that right click trick. They seem to be rotated a little bit funky right now. I'm a little confused. Press play. Yeah, he's got a serious foot. He can really kick stuff hard. What's confusing me right now is that from above, they don't really look to be straight on in this. Oh, it's because I'm looking at it this way. All right, so let's just grab them all. I've just shift and clicked down this list in my world outliner, which is really sweet because I can just move them all as a group now. They're not grouped, like, don't get confused. They're not technically grouped together. They're just selected as a group. So I'll put it like that. And my first person guy here. Now, this might frustrate you. When you grab your mannequin, your third person guy, I should say, you get this big picture comes up, this picture in picture, and it's showing you what's being seen through this camera here. Little power tip. Unreal Editor, Preferences, make sure we're in all settings, Camera, there it is, Camera Preview Size. I'm going to set that up to 2. So I can see something down here, but it's at least not taking up the entire editor window. Give myself a little bit more real estate by shrinking down my content browser. And now I can grab my mannequin and rotate him around. So I want him to see down the lane. And of course you can move him around as well. And you can see down in the little camera preview what it is you're going to see when this starts. So I press play, and now he's looking in that direction. Cool. So the next move might seem a little bit complicated at first, but don't worry about it. It's all good. It's all good. This is really easy, actually. So I'm going to build a brand new bowling ball. I'm actually going to completely delete the old one that I had up here. Now, if you were building a Rube Goldberg machine and you just wanted the ball to roll down a track, what I just did earlier is totally fine. You know, grab a basic sphere, give it physics, and then have it roll into the world down some kind of a ramp or something, and that would be totally fine. You don't have to do what I'm about to do here. But if you want to give this object some impulse to start, you got to do this. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to create a new blueprint. Don't get scared. I know this sounds like programming. It's not a big deal. And we need to make an actor. And that actor, it's got to have a name. And I'm going to give it BP _. This is going to be my bowling ball. Spelled it right. Wow, nice. Double click. And that opens up the blueprint editor, which is great. So you got 3 tabs up here: viewport, construction script, and the event graph. We're going to come back to the event graph in a minute, but in the viewport, we got to build our object. So we got to add a component to this. We can simply add in a sphere. And I'm going to call this my bowling ball. And get this big old sphere here. I'm not even going to move it or resize it or do anything to it in here. But this is just simply a static mesh that is now related to this blueprint. And it's kind of cool because I can change to other static meshes later if I want to just see if it works and then change it later. But I want to get this ball moving under physics. So I got to simulate physics, mass in kilograms, and make this 10 kilograms. Very nice. Cool. Now, whenever you're building up a blueprint, you want to click compile, hit save, and now you can drag it out into the world. And I mean, at first you're going to be like, wow, this is not really all that exciting. I'm just put it up high like so, and then press play, and it's, well, just another sphere that I can kick around. So why didn't I just put a sphere in the world and make it a physics object? Well, now this is programmable. So I can go into this world here, like so, and I can see, there's the viewport, construction script, event graph. Then when I go into it the next time, I can see that there are base events happening. Ooh, cool, cool, cool. Neat. So I'm gonna delete these bottom ones, and when this begins to play, I would like to, I just drag a wire off of this little arrow here. So when you begin to play the game, execute something, and it's like, whoa, there's a lot in here. So these are all just functions and events and classes that you can call. And the one that I want to add, ADD, is impulse. So give me an impulse to bowling ball. Because I'd named it nicely in this blueprint, it already sees that variable name for that object. Huh, cool. Whoopsie. So you can grab your nodes and you can drag them around to make it look pretty. And you're programming, my friends. So I think I can test this out by like, all right, I'm going to add an impulse to the Z order. And I'm going to say, give me 10,000 power units. I don't even know what that unit is. Newtons of force. Z. Cool. Don't forget, compile, save, play. And it went up before it came down because that's on the Z order. Double click on the VP again. Now, if you want, you can grab the tab and dock it to the top. That's really kind of cool. So I've docked this blueprint up here so I can toggle back and forth nice and easily. So I could muck around in here and say, okay, well, Y? It's not Z. I want it to move towards the bowling pins. So it's not Z. Is it X? And I could go negative if I want, 10,000. Mess around, have some fun. Compile, save, go back to the level, hit play. Oops, now it's going that way. Not what I want. Press the escape key to get out of the simulation, head back here. I'm guessing, and I've done this before, so negative 20,000. So just doubled the force, save, compile, press the play. Nice. This is what I want. This is exactly what I want. Another tip to keep in mind, you can always run the game full screen. If you go under play here, you can say open in a new PIE editor window, and then double click on the top and you can see this nice and full screen. So that's cool. Super cool. Now, obviously that's not where the bowling ball would start. It would start maybe here. So all I've done is added a force to get this thing going. That's all. No rocket science, just a little bit of computer science. And I'm gonna reposition my little dude. Don't forget to save all, save all, save all, save all, and press the play button. Cool. Nice, nice, nice. Now, what's great, you can go into your blueprint if you want, head back into your viewport, highlight your object, and give it a texture if you want. Materials, because we brought in the basic materials, or let me pick one first. Light stage skybox, the male body. Let's make it burnished steel. Because we brought in those assets earlier on, the free ones when we created the project, this is just going to look great. And I can shrink it down inside my blueprint so I don't have to scale it out there in the on the stage. I can if I want, but you'll see now we've got this really nice chrome ball. Looks really, oh, that looks awesome. Yeah, you can scale it here too, I do believe. Now you'll notice it's kind of frustrating because it's jumping in increments. That's because snapping is turned on up here for scaling. Up here. So these are all snapping, snap rotation, snap movement, snap scaling. So now when I do a scale, it's nice and smooth. Now you'll see this white ball. Don't worry about that. That's just the indicator of the blueprint. It doesn't actually render. Play. Cool. It's working. So this is a way if you want to get your simulation started and you wanted to add an impulse to a static mesh. That's the way we do it, using the blueprints code. I'm just moving this around so I can see if I can't get a perfect strike. Now, I'm going to show you an advanced way to actually make this interactive. So I want to be able to press the E key to launch the sphere because I don't want it to happen right away. I want to be able to tap the E key. Now the problem is we've created this blueprint and I would love to be able to go in here and under the event graph, instead of on the event begin play, wouldn't it be nice if we could just use one of the built-in inputs? And there's a whole lot of them in here. Just scroll down to inputs. Now I'm right clicking to get this to pop up. So input, and then in here we can see that there's the keyboard, and then there's all our stuff on our number pad. And the letter E, for example. Now E is right beside W, ASD, so I want E to be the one that drives the event. If I just simply put that in, sadly it will not work. Now, you cannot put inputs on objects in your world. No fun. You have to actually put the input onto this guy here. And I figured out a fast way to get this to work. First things first, I want to introduce to the project an input. Now if we look at our third person guy and we look carefully here in the world outliner, we'll see that we can edit our blueprints quickly by clicking on these little links. So edit the third person character's blueprint. And at first blush, when you look at the event graph, it's like, ooh, this is getting complicated. But this is what it takes to make that character run around the world and jump. If you look carefully, you can see how it rotates around when we press the A and D keys, the mouse inputs to have it move the camera around and animate the character, the jump, all these things. Now I could just throw in here the input E. So keystrokes and things you do with your game controller and your VR controllers, they have to live in here and then tell other objects to do work. So the easiest way to do this, first things first, I'm going to delete this other bowling ball. So if all you need is at the very beginning a bowling ball or a sphere or a cube or anything that you're using for your simulation to move, then you can just simply add an impulse directly to the object using blueprints, like I did here. But I want this to actually be interactive, so I press the E key and something happens. So I'm going to edit the third person blueprint, and in its list of components up here, I'm going to add a new component. I'm going to throw another sphere in, and I'm going to call this one bowling ball. Now it's local to this class, if you will. So I can call it exactly what I named it in the other blueprint, that's fine. And now what I want to do is tell the project, I gotta go up here to edit, project settings. For the engine, it's got its own set of inputs. And because we chose the template of third person, there's a lot of stuff already set up for us, bindings, these action maps. So there's a variable hanging out here called jump, and if we look at what that is, whoa, jump is actually related to all of these different Oculus Go. There's the space bar that makes it jump, reset the VR view, axis mappings. Whoa, cool, interesting. And setting of variable scales, which is neat. Pretty intense. I'm gonna add a new action map. And this is gonna be called just throw. And it's intended to make the ball look like it's being thrown by the guy. Select a key value. And I'm just going to type in E. So I click the little button here, type in E. You can have Shift, Alt, Command if you want. And that's it. So now this will pop up in our blueprints as a new input available to our third person blueprint. There's no save button in here, so don't feel like you have to scroll down. You make a change, it happens. But we do want to save all from time to time. So now back here, and maybe I'll hop out for a second just to show you again, highlight your third person character, or you could find it in your world outliner, click on the little edit the blueprint, hop over to the event graph so you can see him in the viewport. Neat. And there's my bowling ball that I created. I'm going to position it actually up high. I do have to tell this in the blueprint, as we have so many times before, to simulate physics, mass in kgs, 10. And then I'm going to actually give it some scale. I'm going to shrink it down just a little bit. I want it to be, whoa. Undo. I'm gonna grab the right thing here. You get the right one, there we go. That should be the right size. And now for my materials, I'm just gonna go shopping for something cool in my material set. Metal frame, that's kind of nice. What did I have going on before? There's some beautiful materials that just come with it. The chair, there's some stone. Basic floor, that's what I've been using for my world. What was that nice chrome looking thing? There it is, burnished steel. Nice. So it's under physics, and it's living now inside of the blueprint that is my third person guy. If I compile this and save it and hit play, well, it's just now hanging out like a new sphere, and I can kick it. Yeah, okay, so it's under physics, that's good. But I would like for it to have an impulse when I press the E key, right? So go back to my event graph. I'm going to add now my input touch. And I'm learning from the other stuff up here, input touch, input touch. So when I touch the E key, right click in the dark gray area, input touch. Where are ya? There's so many options in here. There we go. Input. I just had to type in input, and there is throw. Remember, I created that in the project's settings. Wonder if I just typed in throw. Hey, cool. It isolates it. So that's going to be the event. Nice. So when I release the key, do stuff. And what are you going to do? I would like to add an impulse. Nice, look what it did. It found bowling ball local to this class. Cool. Clean up your nodes. And I remembered from my previous playtime that negative 20,000 seems to be really good. Negative 20,000. And that works for my situation. Your situation is going to require some messing around with that number to figure out what's going to work. So in theory, when I press play, it's going to hit the ground. Now I can navigate the world. I don't even have to be beside it. And I can tap the E key. Pew. Cool. Nice. Nice. What happens if I press it again? Okay, cool. Every time I press it, yep, it's going to do its thing. Fun. Now, it's not hitting the bowling ball, so I wonder, could I make this a little bit of a game right now where I have to actually position the bowling ball there and then press E? Well, we know that this guy is probably the world's strongest soccer player, so I gotta be careful when I nudge this forward. There we go, cool. Nice. That was perfect. So, it won't do anything, obviously, until I release the E key. So I'm gonna kick it forward and then E. There's a fun, weird little silly bowling game. Position it, E. Nice. Cool. There you have it, my friends. This is how we can do 3 different approaches to adding some physics simply to our world. I'm going to close down these blueprints and go into showing another really cool thing. I'm just going to set up a hinge on a door. I was really showing this to my 4th semester students. It's really easy to do. And it also requires a blueprint. So I'm going to create a new actor and right away call it BP_hinged door. I'm going to save all, double click on my hinged door. And I'm just going to set something up that works. Any old thing that works. So first things first, I'm going to throw in 2 cubes. Cube, add another component called cube. Now you'll notice it became a child to the other cube. That can lead to problems. So you can actually drag it up and attach it to the scene root because you want these 2 objects to be unique. So this is actually going to be, I'm going to rename this my hinge. And this is going to be my door. And then I'm going to add to my default scene root another component, PHYS, a physics constraint. And I'm going to call this, double click slowly. I'm going too fast here. I'm going to call my physics constraint my axis of rotation. Now I got all this goober out here on my scene. This is really cool. So my hinge actually, I don't want it to be a cube. I want it to be a cylinder, and I could have made a cylinder right away, but this is kind of neat where I can go into my static meshes, under search assets, just type in cylinder, and with our basic set that came in with when we created the tool, or when we created the level using the template, and we had the starter content turned on, then this cylinder was built in, which is nice. I'm gonna put snap back on everything, snap my scale and snap my rotation, and set this up like so. Same with my cube. And I'm gonna set my scale of my cube, it's Y to 0.1. And this one up here, this cylinder, I'm gonna give it scale 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. Yeah. And then this doorway here, I'm just gonna move it. Yeah, I think the height of that hinge is wrong, so what I'm gonna change my, that is my Z. I'm gonna put that back to 1. And then I'm gonna position it on the floor. Put it back down on the ground. And this one I'm gonna move up like this. And it's okay if it's stuck inside a little bit, inside the hinge. So I got hinge, door, and axis. Now the axis itself, I don't want it to be kicked around. I don't want it to be influenced by collision. So somewhere in here, I can tell this object, the axes, so disable collision for the axis object. So I highlighted it and then I disabled collision. Now the door itself needs to have physics enabled. So I'm going to simulate physics for the door. Cool. Then I go back to the axis and I need to tell this physics constraint who gets to play with it, who's hanging out in the party. So component name 1 is the hinge. Component 2 is going to be, and I named it door, door. Compile, save. I'm going to close this down, and I'm just going to throw BP hinged into the world. Put it up a bit like so, and press play. And it got blown right off its hinges. It's constrained, but oh, that's just not good. So how do we fix that? Well, it turns out that on our axis, it is a constraint, right? So it's going to constrain what it can do physically. So swing 1 motion, we could lock them all. So the twist motion, yeah, it's locked. Swing motion 2, locked. Swing motion 1, let's let it fly free. Fly, be free. Compile, save, play, and let's see what happens now. Nifty. Now watch this. I'll try to do this as quick as I can. I'm gonna go back to Maya, and I'm gonna create a whole new object. H, I'm gonna hide that stuff. I'm gonna put in a new box. I'm gonna scale it really big. I'm gonna make this real big and real wide. I'm gonna make a rotating door. I'm gonna position it up above the ground. This guy here, I'm going to duplicate it using rotate. Shift, I'm holding Shift and J, and then I can rotate it and duplicate it 90 degrees. And then I can take these two objects and I can co-join them. So I'm going to use the combine button up here to combine them together. I'm going to delete its history and freeze its position. And I want to make sure that this thing's kind of up above the floor just a little bit. And it is. Once more, I do want to put the rotation point. I want to put the, what do you call it? It's pivot. Every program's got a different name for this thing. In Maya, it's pivot. I'm going to hold V and snap that down to the bottom like so. Cool. So I've got this guy here. Now, if I shoot this over and give it a great name, so you're an SM underscore revolving door, like so, and give it a good material, and you can throw a Lambert on it. I'm just going to make it red. Why not? Make it red. And I'm going to give that Lambert a great name, M underscore revolving door. Nice. Cool. This should work. If I shoot this over now, I'm going to send it to Unreal. Don't forget, I've got the project already set. That's awesome. And I'm going to shoot over the selection. And I'm going to call this SM underscore revolving door. Export selection back into Unreal. I'm going to close down my BP. Right click into my folder down here and import that asset. There's my revolving door. Import all. It's going to create collision because don't forget I haven't made that yet. So when I put that out into my world, I'm going to check it for scale. It's not big enough. Back to Maya. I'm going to make you real big. You just got a glimpse into my Dungeons and Dragons campaign. Haha. I'm going to make it real big. File, send to Unreal, selection. I love this workflow. Go back to Unreal, my friend. Escape. Right click, re-import with new file. No, just re-import. That's nice and big now. Cool. And I'm just gonna shove it off to the side so it doesn't get hit by anything. Maybe this sphere here, I'm just gonna put it in front of that revolving door and see what happens because it has impulse, right? So it spun that around. Now I'd love for this thing to spin, but you'll notice I can't get inside it. I can't get inside that. Why? Well, if I look at the collision, the simple collision that it generated, oh, problem. It's just made a box, which is going to make it really hard for this thing to even work. Now what I thought I could do originally when I tried this example was just grab this shape, duplicate it, and call it UCX underscore and make it the collision object. But this has got a convex hull. So what I needed to do was create, and I'll just do this with boxes. It's easy. I need to create these two new collision objects. Yeah? I'm going to make sure that they're wider than the door itself. so that it encapsulates them. I'm going to go down and make it easy on myself here. Grab my verts down here, and I'm going to position those at 0. I'm going to hold down the X key and just snap it to the floor. Are you snapping to the grid, my friend? The X key should force it to snap. We can use our eye. X key, come on. There we go. Snap, 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 snap. Just a little bit outside is nice. That's good. The top. And I'm just creating these UCX objects, these really handy collision objects. Now, it doesn't need to be that wide. Terrible place for my pivot to be. So D key. I'm going to move this over 2. Now some of you in the world are probably thinking, why didn't you just change your, let me go back to object mode, that might help. Object mode, there we go. Pivot's in the right place. It's exactly where I want it. Yeah, so some people might be wondering, why didn't I just change the scale of my world while I was modeling? You could have changed it to meters just as easily. It don't matter. That would have made the grid a lot bigger right now, and snaps would have been easier to execute. Anyway, it does not matter. So I'm going to duplicate this object with my rotate tool. Shift J to clone it and snap. And now over here I can see I've got these 3 objects. I'm going to see if I can't just steal the name, copy. Nope. So UCX underscore, that will tell Unreal that this is a collision object, and it's got to have the perfect name, SM underscore revolving door underscore 01. If you have only one collision object, you don't need this, but it does have to be the exact same name. Perfect. UCX underscore SM underscore revolving door underscore 02. We've got an array of collision objects that relate to this object. Basically is what we're telling Unreal. Let me save my scene. And with these 3 selected, File, send to Unreal, Selection. I'm going to overwrite the revolving door, export selection, yes, it's all good. Go back in here, re-import the base mesh, and looky looky, it's beautiful. I've got a perfect collision mesh. Now if I go into my scene and run it, I should be allowed to go inside of this now. Yeah. I'm not left with the other collision that was auto-generated. Now I can actually get inside the object. Okay, well, where am I going with this? This blueprint here with the hinged door, go back to the viewport. Now this cube called door, don't forget I scaled it, right? I squished it down. I'm gonna turn that back to 1. Because what I'm gonna do is actually not use this cube, but I'm gonna switch to a different static mesh, and I can type in the name of the object. That's why naming convention is so important. The revolving door. So cool. So cool. And I'm going to position it roughly where I think I should have it. Is right about here. Yeah, let's just test it out. Nice. Compile it, save it, play it. Now can I spin the door? Yes, I can. I sure can. Now it's determined its mass by its size. So right now it's really hard to push this door. Ugh. So grab that object. Over here, we can go to the physics settings. Where are you? Physics settings. Physics. Mass in K. Let's turn that down. Let's make it 20 kilograms. Compile, save, play. Now it's super light, and what set it into motion was this sphere here. But I can interact with it too. Yeah, it's so light right now. Like a door like that would not be 20 kilograms, it would be heavier. But don't forget, I had this sphere over here that had an impulse on it in its blueprint that's gonna hit that door and get it spinning. So this might be some way to get things working for your Rube Goldberg machines if that's what you're working on. Let's shoot it from up there and see what happens. Now I gotta move my guy so that he can see what's going on. So I'm gonna rotate my guy so he can see, oh, that's moving. Yeah, that bowling ball, it's attached to his blueprint, right? So press play. Oh, it missed. Did it miss it? Let's press play again. Nailed it. Cool. So that's how we can make a hinge, revolving doors. Got some nice complex collisions on our bowling pins. Got a fun little game here that can, whoa, I wasn't expecting that to happen. Press the E key to get some interactivity going. So this scenario, that's so interesting that the physics is being simulated differently every time. That's neat. Kick the ball, press E. Yeah, this is fun. So much fun. So I hope that you all out there in the world who are just getting into physics with Unreal and learning how to create these collision objects. Same thing applies with Blender. If you're in your collection and you just name your sub-objects UCX and then export them as groups, then the same theory applies to creating these complex collision situations. Like you can see here with my bowling pin. Double click on that. Collision, simple collision. And just to say it again, the complex collision seems like the solution because it's super tight wrapped to the edge of the object always. It doesn't work with physics simulations, unfortunately. So we got to build these simple collision systems, like I did with these two simple spheres for the bowling pin. I just stretched them out. And don't forget, those things cannot have convex hulls. They can't have little dips in and out, but instead you make these separate objects, like I did here for the door, and just make sure that you use that very fancy name, UCX underscore. This part has to be identical to the object that it relates to, and if you have more than one, that you create an array. All right, don't forget to save your stuff. Save all, and that's going to be the end of this tutorial. Have fun, everybody.